I'm back in New York? I didn't
know
that.
That's what I heard. That's what the rumor is.
No, it's not back in New York. Gosh, I'm like, now you're getting me confused. Where are we here? Are we here in Washington?
James, why did you tell me she was in New York?
Oh, I love that. No, now the producer gets hammered.
He said, now Don Jr.'s on your show tonight, that he's in New York. I didn't understand. My mistake. I humbly apologize for that terrible error of reporting.
You had a great show tonight, Hannity.
Oh,
Next time I'm in New York, I'm going to come find you somehow.
Well, you avoided me all last week. So.
Well, that was easy, actually. All right, Hannity, great show.
You give it in the one hand and take it away with the other. Have a great show, Laura.
All right, I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from Washington tonight. Donald Trump Jr. will be here in moments to react to the BuzzFeed bombshell that kind of fizzled out in spectacular fashion, a lot more. But first, the tale of the tape. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The left-wing smear and the Never Trump smear squad is at it again. With this piece of video from Friday, a smattering of nasty Trump resistors set out to destroy the lives of a group of Kentucky high school students in D.C. for the March for Life. Well, they're from Covington Catholic High and are seen in the video purportedly confronting this Native American activist at the Lincoln Memorial. They were immediately denounced by left-wing loons, the media, and various know-nothing celebrities as basically just MAGA-hatted racists.
A mob of MAGA hat-wearing high school students, and clearly these boys are not getting a good education because it makes little sense to angrily chant "build the wall" to a population with literally zero illegal immigrants.
The net result is that video, and Americans again trying to figure out where race relations stand in this country.
We've come a long, long way from the days of police dogs and fire hoses and lynchings and those types of things. But those activities take different forms today. The KKK, the Nazis, they aren't running around in hoods and burning crosses. They're getting tiki torches and wearing azads and pullovers, right?
Even Catholics like media darling Father James Martin jumped on the condemnation train, tweeting, "Catholic school students at the March for Life attempt to shame and disrespect a man at the Indigenous Peoples March. These actions are not Catholic, not Christian, and not acceptable." Well, in record time, the school administrators in the Diocese of Covington also issued statements condemning the students' actions, and they reserved the right to expel them. But perhaps most disappointing of all was when the head of the March for Life, Gene Mancini, rushed in to virtue signal, tweeting, "The reprehensible behavior shown in the video in no way represents the 46 years and millions of people who have peacefully and respectfully gathered in Washington, D.C. to stand up for the unborn." Well, she and Father Martin and some others later backed off when they all realized that there was another side to the story. It turns out when you look at an hour's worth of video covering the entire incident, a few things emerge. The students had gathered to listen to a group that calls itself the Black Hebrew Israelites. I'd never heard of them before, but for anyone, I guess, who's traversed Times Square, the routine of these activists is pretty predictable. They use racially charged rhetoric in an attempt to provoke reactions, and then they capture it all on video. And this is what they were doing to the Covington high school students.
This child molesting priest right there. Right. Let's make America great again. A bunch of child molesting.
Look at all these dusty crackers with that racist garbage on. Look at these dirty crackers.
A bunch of future school shooters.
That's right.
A bunch of incest babies. That's right. A bunch of babies made out of incest. The biggest terrorist on the face of this earth is the pale-faced man, woman, and child.
Well, contrary to the early reporting on this story, it became clear that the students didn't confront anyone. All they did was stand their ground as they were being verbally assaulted. Now, why wasn't that the focus of the media story? Like, imagine if a couple of white pastors started yelling racial epithets at, say, black students on MLK Day. You think that would be a story? You bet it would be, and it should be. But let's face it, this is different. because the Covington students had marched for the unborn. And the other sin they committed was daring to show up wearing red MAGA hats in D.C. So they were cast as a bunch of troublemakers. The Native American activist initially claimed he was surrounded by the kids, but other video shows it was he, Nathan Phillips, who initially approached the students, banging that drum in the face of Nick Sandman, the student. Well, Phillips, the activist, claims he did so to diffuse the tensions between the black Hebrew Israelites and the students. Well, does he look like he's diffusing tensions to you? The Covington students started singing school chants, but not Sandman, who, despite someone yelling and beating a drum in his face, did not say a word. The Covington High School junior, in a statement, wrote yesterday, "I believe that by remaining motionless and calm, I was helping to diffuse the situation. I realized everyone had cameras and that perhaps a group of adults were trying to provoke a group of teenagers into a larger conflict. I'm being called every name in the book, including racist, and I'll not stand for this mob-like character assassination of my family's name." Well, the left isn't used to people standing their ground, are they? Not the way the Covington teen stood his. I think a lot of them get a perverse thrill when they drive their political targets out of restaurants, or when they show up at their homes, or in some cases, even physically attack them. Just for, what, the clothing? They're wearing clothing with messaging that the left-wing activists don't like? But these people, I'm not going to stop calling them activists. They're not activists. And they're not simply professional rabble-rousers. They're more like, I don't know, they're more like domestic terrorists. And yeah, that's how I characterize them, because they're used to operating with total impunity because they usually get cover from a complicit media. And sometimes even from local officials who do nothing, as Trump supporters are literally taking a beating, as they did during that June 2016 campaign event in San Jose for Trump. These Trotskyite trolls, incapable and uninterested in actually winning the war of ideas, are instead at war with the First Amendment and the free expression of others. And by the way, who caused this caustic environment? This is the environment we live in today, where leftist hacks engage in these guerrilla tactics. Trump? I mean, the president responsible for the booming economy, including the record low unemployment for young people and for minorities? Or how about the guy who defied all the skeptics to get criminal justice reform passed? Look, he ain't perfect. None of us are. But he did not empower the mob. But meet a few of the people who did.
When the president first assumed office with his racist and violent rhetoric.
Racism is still alive and well in the United States of America, and it's just we have a president that seems to help unleash it and give people a feeling that they can come out of the closet with that kind of racism.
We have a hater in the White House, the birther-in-chief, the Grand Wizard of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. One of the things that we've learned is that while Jim Crow may be dead, he's still got some nieces and nephews that are alive and well.
Now, this Covington Catholic High School episode also reveals something that reared its ugly head during the Kavanaugh battle. Blatant anti-Catholic bigotry and an animus even toward Catholic education. The left was clearly attempting to spin this nothing story into an indictment not only of Trump supporters, but of the pro-life cause and the faith that sustains it. If pressed, what they'd tell you their ultimate goal is to shut down Catholic and Christian education and eradicate all vestiges of those moral traditions underpinning them. Here's a smattering of the weekend hate. Check it out. Former chair of the DNC, Howard Dean, howled the following. Covington Catholic High School seems like a hate factory to me. Why not just close it? An LA-based DJ named Uncle Shoes tweeted, "Lock the kids in the school and burn that bee to the ground." Jack Morrissey, a producer who worked on Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast, tweeted this beauty: "MAGA kids go screaming, hats first, into the wood chipper." Eric Abris of Vulture tweeted, I don't know what it says about me, but I've truly lost the ability to articulate the hysterical rage, nausea, and heartache this makes me feel. I just want these people to die. Simple as that. Every single one of them. And their parents. CNN's Bakari Sellers tweeted out of the Covington student saying this: he is deplorable. Some people can also be punched in the face. My friends, you have to know the new rules. If someone is wearing a red MAGA hat, you're that person, well, you're a racist. And if you're a Catholic at a pro-life march in a red hat, you deserve whatever happens to you. The real thugs, they're not the students who stood and did nothing. They're the people who jeered the students in person and online. And the people who actually threatened them with actual violence. And by the way, most of these tweets have not been deleted. And few accounts have even been suspended. That's only just a few of them. And what does that mean? It's going to happen again and again and again. Though, if you have the right political views, you can actually assault law enforcement on the steps of the D.C. Monuments, landmarks like the Supreme Court. You're good to go, no questions asked.
Mr. Hoffman, why is it you think we shouldn't be on the steps? Mr. Hoffman, why is it you think we shouldn't be on the steps? Are you concerned about your safety or the safety of your coworkers? Are you concerned about your safety or the safety of your coworkers? Do you have reason to believe that people here are carrying weapons? That there aren't? Do you believe that there is a safety concern for your fellow officers?
Verbal assaults that the police have to put up with every day? Well, it's the First Amendment. Now, why wasn't that a story, though? Lots of other stories like it. The Covington students deserve more than an apology. Lucky for them, there was that additional clarifying video that made so many of these malevolent morons eat crow. Still, though, these anti-male, anti-religious zealots have already done their damage. Lives have been threatened, just like lives on the Duke lacrosse team, the UVA fraternity brothers, or Brett Kavanaugh. They're all treated as disposable. Kind of like collateral cultural damage. The question is, though, how will we as a society hold the real thugs accountable? And that's the angle. Here now, Glenn Greenwald, co-founding editor and columnist for The Intercept, who covers a lot of media issues. Glenn, why was this such a potentially juicy narrative for the media? I happily was not focusing on this over the weekend. I was with my family, but I started seeing it blow up. And I was wondering, gosh, this is really a wild story. I wonder if there's any other video. And then, of course, other video came up.
So I didn't comment at all over the weekend because it was immediately clear to me that these snippets of video would make it impossible to know with any confidence what actually took place. And maybe that's my lawyer background. Maybe it's yours as well. Even in a controlled courtroom setting where there's due process and all kinds of controls to make sure evidence is presented authentically and without distortion, it's very difficult to know who's telling the truth and who isn't, what happened and what didn't. And so when you start having this kind of trial by Twitter mob, it's just obvious that there's no way to have any confidence about what took place. Having said that, and I think that's dangerous, I do think that even the full video reveals some things that I do think are disturbing in the students' actions, even when it's true that some of the worst things said about them are clearly false. There's some of them, at least, who are doing things like mocking the Native American with tomahawk chants, mocking the way in which he was singing. They were 15 years old, but at the same time, I don't consider that exemplary behavior. I think there is a question about why this captured so much media attention, and I think one of the reasons is that a lot of our politics is very racially polarized, and you can blame the left, and I think sometimes that's legitimate, but a lot of President Trump's rhetoric is responsible for that as well, and I think that's the subtext here.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate your analysis because it's even-handed. Thank God I didn't have video of stuff I was doing when I was 15, 16. I didn't travel to Washington. I didn't go to stuff like this, but people do stupid things. But when you think about the way that people are approaching, whether it's law enforcement, members of the military, things they say to them on a daily basis, get an inch away from their face and scream and yell and horrible things. Maybe People think they deserve it. Maybe there's people they don't deserve it. But the media never, ever, ever roll with that for like a weekend of story of coverage. But these kids were wearing those MAGA hats, and it reminded me a lot of the Kavanaugh story. It reminded me like Georgetown Prep. They're all a bunch of horrible people. They're all a bunch of drunks. They don't do. It was that stereotype, and it's almost, Glenn, the kind of profiling that the left accuses police of doing regularly. But they're doing it. Like everybody's profiling each other like snap judgments without taking a breath, without saying, okay, let's look at really what happened here. And let's look at some of the background on the activist himself who's accused other people wrongly of things in the past. But they didn't do that because it's a kid with a red hat who looks like he has a smirk on his face, so he must be a racist. That really was the conclusion by the dominant media.
I think the worst thing that you showed was the tweet from a CNN paid commentator who essentially was urging that a 15-year-old child be physically and violently attacked. I mean, that's really pervert. It's actually kind of not just perverse, but perverted to have fantasies about punching a 15-year-old boy in the face based on things that, as it turned out, there's at least questions about what he did. Why isn't that kind of incitement to violence something at least as disturbing? But again, I think the context here is really important, which is there are a lot of people in the country who are African American, who are Latino, who are Native American, who are Muslim, who feel, I think with good reason, vulnerable and attacked, and this is the context for all of these debates. Imagine, Laura, and I do think this is an important point.
What's the media's role in this, Glenn?
Well, in this case, the media was incredibly reckless, and they've been reckless in many cases in flaming it, and a lot of them even admitted that. But imagine, Laura, if this had been an elderly white priest who was leading the pro-life movement, surrounded by Black or Latino teenagers, chanting, mocking him. I think things would be seen differently by both sides. So I think you're right that journalists in this case and many others wildly and recklessly inflame the situation. But I also think it's not without justification and validity that a lot of people see this as concerning behavior.
And Glenn, what about the BuzzFeed story? I've got to pick your brain on that real quickly. We're going to talk to Don Jr. about it as well. I mean, firestorm last week. Now they still stand by their story, even though the special counsel says we don't, it didn't happen.
When the history of the Trump-Russia story is written, unquestionably, one of the most shocking parts will be how reckless the U.S. media has been in their reporting. I just did yesterday the top 10 most humiliating failures, where they didn't just get stories a little bit wrong, but radically and fundamentally wrong, major stories. In this case, I think we should be a little careful with BuzzFeed because we don't want to treat Robert Mueller like this infallible deity who passes down the word of God from the mountaintop and we all just immediately accept it. But I do think that it's very strange that he chose this story for the first time to come out and say that it was inaccurate, which seems to be clear that there's something very odd going on in BuzzFeed's reporting that made a lot of people justifiably question it.
All right, Glenn, we're going to track all these stories. We really appreciate your perspective tonight on all of this. Thanks so much.
All right, Laura, thank you.
All right, and up ahead, the media in crisis. Donald Trump Jr. is here exclusively. His first reaction to that BuzzFeed now debunked scoop.
This program is sponsored by Safe Light Auto.
The media is in crisis. From the warped confrontation in D.C. we just discussed to BuzzFeed's embarrassing debacle. And in just moments, Don Trump Jr. will join me exclusively to talk about that now debunked bombshell report. But first, we want to break down exactly what's been happening, starting with some new developments this weekend and today. Trace Gallagher joins us from the West Coast newsroom. Trace.
And Laura, to be clear, the reporting by BuzzFeed said the special counsel learned that Trump ordered his lawyer, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about Trump Tower negotiations with Russia through, quote, interviews with multiple witnesses, internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of other documents. But despite this alleged litany of damning documents, it's unclear if BuzzFeed actually saw any of them. One reporter said he did, the other said he didn't, and now neither of them will comment. Watch.
Really, at this point, because of the calls for a leak investigation and the sort of sensitivity around that matter, we really can't go any further at all in order not to jeopardize our sources.
And yet special counsel made it crystal clear the evidence BuzzFeed cited is wrong. Quote, BuzzFeed's description of specific statements to the special counsel's office and characterization of documents and testimony obtained by this office regarding Michael Cohen's congressional testimony are not accurate. So why did Mueller's team take the highly unusual step of issuing a statement? Our chief White House correspondent John Roberts says Rudy Giuliani says his office spoke to Mueller's office on Friday regarding the article, and there was ultimate agreement that a significant portion of the BuzzFeed story was false. Giuliani says there are no texts, no emails, or other corroborating documents. So then why didn't Mueller respond to BuzzFeed when it notified them the story was about to break? Well, because BuzzFeed emailed special counsel saying it had, quote, a story coming stating that Michael Cohen was directed by President Trump himself to lie to Congress about his negotiations related to the Trump-Moscow project. Not a single word about the special counsel. And the Washington Post wrote, quote, people familiar with the matter said Mueller spokesperson Peter Carr told others in the government that he would have more vigorously discouraged the reporters from proceeding with the story had he known it would allege Cohen had told the special counsel Trump directed him to lie. BuzzFeed's editor-in-chief told CNN he thought the email stated, quote, the heart of the story. And BuzzFeed continues to stand behind its reporting. Laura.
Trace, thanks so much. And apparently being called out by the Mueller team wasn't enough. Appearing on the ironically named Reliable Sources show Sunday, one of the authors of the BuzzFeed piece tripled down.
I have further confirmation that this is right. We're being told to stand our ground. This is our reporting is going to be borne out to be accurate, and we're 100% behind it.
What if the sources are just wrong?
They're not.
Not intentionally, not trying to hurt you, but just what if they're wrong?
You know, they're not. They're not. I'm confident.
Tough follow-up there. Here now exclusively, and his very first appearance on the Ingraham Angle is Donald Trump Jr. Don, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Good to be with you.
When this story first came out, reporters were quick to pounce, quick to turn the spotlight on you.
Well, they always are, Laura, and this isn't the first time that happened. You saw it right after I did my testimony, and they said, oh, Donald Trump Jr. had the WikiLeaks information because presumably Adam Schiff leaked it right after my testimony to them and conveniently took out the 1 before the 4, turning the 14th into the 4th, meaning I had it 6 days instead, before the world saw it, as opposed to 4 days after the entire world saw it. This has gone on time and time again. It also happened when Lanny Davis said something along the effect of, I told my father about the Russia meeting and he was there. He was CNN's source. He then walked it back and realized it was totally wrong. Their own source did it, and yet today they still haven't pulled that back. And the reason is they need it to be true, Laura. They've been pushing this nonsense for 2 years. They've found nothing, but anytime there's a negative, anytime there's a chance to get Trump, they're going to jump on it. They're basically leftists policing leftists at this point. I love watching some of the CNN commentary. Well, this is going to give us all a bet. Of course it is, because you jump on it each and every time. They cover themselves with the, well, if true, well, if you're not sure it's true, don't push it for 14 hours straight.
But you have to see at 2 p.m. on Friday, Don, this is what they were going with at CNN.
What about the family here? I mean, when you read this BuzzFeed piece, it's Ivanka Trump and Don Jr. who are implicated. Don Jr. testified to Congress in September of 2017, saying he was, quote unquote, his words, peripherally aware of it. Afterwards, Democrats Chris Coons and Jackie Spears said it is possible that he lied. How much jeopardy could these family members be?
Well, I think that's what we have to wait and see what happens. And if family members of Trump are going to be implicated, that could be a reason for him to resign and try to work out a deal to save his family.
Don, they were going right to impeachment, then to resignation, and then...
I mean, they got him this time, Laura, like the other 75 times, because they haven't exactly panned out. By the way, no different than the story you covered at the beginning, right? You had some Catholic schoolboys that were at a Right to Life march, okay? They were wearing a MAGA hat. They had to pounce because the media wants that to be true. They want a bunch of nice Catholic kids happen to be white. They want them to be the enemy. This is what they've created. The media has done this to themselves. They have shot themselves in the foot time and time again because they so desperately want this to be the truth, as opposed to saying, you know what? Trump's done a darn good job as president. If you look at any economic metric today, Laura, we are substantially better off than we were 2 short years ago before he took office, because he's doing a great job. Imagine what he could do without the noise, without the, oh, every day there's a new reason for impeachment. Let him do his job. That's the job he was elected to do. And the media right now is really trying to subvert this democracy. They've done more to hurt the credibility of this country's institution as a democracy than anything in history.
Not only the president, but anyone who supports the president. Doesn't matter if you're 14 or you're my age or if you've
God forbid you wear a MAGA hat, Laura, because that must make you all sorts of things. I mean,
Donnie, the issue with this Trump Tower thing keeps coming back, keeps coming back, and we know the BuzzFeed feed deal, and they claim they have it's all sourced and everything.
Of course it is.
When you've had time to think about this, you testified. When was the last discussion about this Trump Tower deal? Because Rudy got everybody really confused, I have to say. And I love Rudy. He hasn't been on the show in a while. We love him. But he goes on Meet the Press, and he says, well, it could have been like right through the election. Then he said he was talking in hypothetical terms today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't talk about things that I don't know about. But, unfortunately, that sometimes happens, no different than anyone else. But the reality is this wasn't a deal. We don't know the developer. We don't know the site. We don't know anything about it. Ultimately, it was Michael Cohen essentially trying to get a deal done. He was there for a long time. He wasn't exactly a deal guy. Didn't bring too many to the table, so I don't think anyone took it all that seriously. That's the reality of what went on. But, it's that constant link. Now we got him. You saw the story last week. Donald Trump is a Russian agent. Yeah. The guy that's a billionaire, leading in a pretty incredible lifestyle, he left all of that to go into this snake pit, to go into the swamp, to run against 16, 17 Republican contenders. He's got zero chance of doing that. To then defeat Hillary Clinton, he had zero chance of doing that. He did all this because he's a Russian agent. I mean, the reason the media has no credibility is because this is what they do. This is what they do to themselves each and every time.
Adam Schiff, who has the ability now to call witnesses.
Of course he does. Sure.
Is said he isn't going to stop. BuzzFeed report, no BuzzFeed report. And I want to play something for you and get your reaction.
Are you still going to investigate the claims?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Congress has a fundamental interest in two things. First, in getting to the bottom of why a witness came before us and lied. And who else was knowledgeable that this was a lie.
Even though it's been debunked, Don, he's going to proceed. I imagine he's going to call you back.
Yeah, he's got the reality. He's got nothing else. There's a 99.9% chance he's the guy that was leaking my testimony as I was testifying. I came out of testimony at about 8 o'clock at night looking, and CNN is running quotes from noon on about my testimony. In the House Intelligence Committee. I mean, that has to say something about what's going on in there. Since he's never met a camera he didn't love, I would bet a lot of money that it was him. And the reality is, I've done 25 hours of testimony on a 20-minute meeting. This has been the greatest witch hunt in American history, perhaps world history. In 3 hours, they found the bomber that was the fake bomber. And in 2 years, they haven't found anything other than they got a big bombshell. Oh, they got Trump this time. I've heard it too many times, Laura. The American people don't take this stuff seriously anymore. They look at these people like jokers at this point.
Kamala Harris was out there today. She announced that she's going to run for president. Let's listen.
The path is going to be about talking to people who are right now aware that this economy is not working for working people. It's going to be about talking with people about the fact that right now we have an administration that has waged a full-on assault on American values and American ideals.
Now, Don, when you hear a sitting senator say an assault on American values and American ideals, your dad's called a racist. I've known him for 20 years. I'm sorry.
Laura, the insanity is there. You saw this with the social media platforms attacking the word family because, God forbid, you have family, right? This is this leftist assault. When you talk about this economy not working for the American working class, I mean, Donald Trump's the first president to speak to the American worker in generations at this point. He's the guy delivering it. As I said earlier, there's not a single economic metric where we are not better off as a country today than we were 2 years ago under Barack Obama.
Don,
but with the media carrying the Democrats' baggage, they'll say whatever they want. They should be paid as lobbyists of the DNC at this point.
Are you now still thinking politics in the future? I mean, it's been thought that you were going to go into politics at some point.
Listen, I haven't thought about it that way. For me, it's about, right now, whatever I can do to help my father win, I'm going to do, because I love what's going on. As an American, as a patriot, as a father of 5 young children, I see what he's doing, what he's fighting, and the nonsense barrage that he's taking from the insanity that has become the left. Let's not kid ourselves. This is not your grandfather's Democratic Party. They've really lost their way. They have no interest in protecting Americans, only pushing and furthering their insane agenda. And I'm going to do what I can to help him. Whatever happens in the future, I'll deal with that then. But in the meantime, he's making it pretty easy, given what he's doing, because he's doing a phenomenal job for this country.
2020 is coming already. They're all lining up. Don, thanks so much. Don't be a stranger. Thanks for coming on.
I'll be back.
All right. The Duke lacrosse case, the Virginia fraternity rape that wasn't, the Kavanaugh smears, Covington Catholic high school boys. What do the targets of these media missteps or purposeful missteps have in common? That's next.